Rubecca sat on a chair in her office. The office was beautifully designed and well decorated. There were piles of files on top of the table needed to be sorted out. She held her pen, mopping at the files, lost in thought. A knock on the door made her regain consciousness. Knock, knock, knock. Someone tapped at the door to Rebecca's office softly. "Yeah, come in," she said, now adjusting the files. It was Teresa, her personal assistant. She walked in with another file. "Ma, Rubecca, this is for you," she said, handling over the files she had to her. "Ma, please, are you done with the ones I submitted earlier?" Teresa asked lovely. "Oh, my darling, I'm so sorry. I'm yet to attend to them," she replied with a cracking voice. "All right, Ma. I will come pick them up later," she said, and walked out of the office. Rubecca released some air from her mouth. She stood up from her seat, working around the four corners of the office, pondering over what Vivian, her husband's younger sister, said to her the other day. What's all this? What is really wrong with me? I have gone through a series of tests, and the doctors kept saying nothing is wrong with me. If I'm not the problem, then who is? She murmured to herself. She grabbed her phone at the table and dialed Doc Nathan's number, and picked up at its second ring. "Hello, Doc. Are the test results out? How did it go?" she asked the doctor with her eyes widely opened, looking so nervous to hear what the doctor will say. "Yes, Ma. The test results are out and it confirms that you are all right. There is nothing wrong with you," Nathan responded. "No way. It can't be possible. That's what you guys kept telling me. If nothing is wrong with me, why can't I be pregnant?" "You know what, Doc? I will be going to another hospital since you can't fish out my problems," she said. "Ma'am, what I told you is the truth. You are perfectly okay, but your womb is too weak to carry a baby," he said. "Get off my phone, you quack doctor," she shouted over the phone aggressively. Rubecca is one of the top shareholders in the oil-producing company, while her husband Ken is a trader. Rubecca has been married to Ken for 7 years now without an issue. She has been streaming in and out of several hospitals, seeking for answers to her infertility, but all to no avail. The most terrible part is that her in-laws has risen against her, mostly Vivian. They started giving her sleepless nights and causing her a lot of pains. She always woke up to missed calls from her mother-in-law and terrifying messages from Vivian. After a deep thought, she grabbed her handbag and rushed out from the office. She hopped into her car and drove off. "Hello, darling. Where are you now?" "I'm at the office." "Any problem?" Ken asked, making a face. "Nothing is wrong. I'm on my way to your office now. We need to go see another doctor to know exactly where the problems are," she said. "I don't want to see you at my office." "Rubecca, how many times have I told you not to bother yourself about this, and the problem is not from me either," he said. "I should not bother about what? It is easier for you to say because you don't understand the pains I passed through from your mom and sister Vivian. I can see, it is obvious that you are not bothered nor moved about this. You always come up with excuses when asked to follow me to the doctor. Maybe you are hiding something from me," Rubecca said with a harsh tone, looking so pained and depressed. "Are you out of your senses? Don't tell me you are becoming stupid. Don't you ever use such words at me again, or else you test the other side of me," he thundered, and hung up the call on her ear. Rubecca parked her car on the side of the road, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her husband's harsh words echoed in her mind, cutting deep into her heart. She stared at her trembling hands on the steering wheel, trying to calm herself. "What have I done to deserve this?" she murmured. "Why is my marriage falling apart like this?" The phone vibrated beside her. She hesitated before picking it up, dreading another call from Ken. Instead, it was her best friend, Anita. "Hello, Anita." Rubecca answered with a shaky voice. "Rubecca, what's wrong? I've been calling you all morning," Anita said, her tone full of concern. "I'm fine," Rubecca replied weakly. "You don't sound fine. Are you crying? Where are you? I can come to you." "I'm just by the road near my office. I need some time to think," Rubecca admitted, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Stay there. I'm coming," Anita said firmly before ending the call. Rubecca leaned back in her seat, grateful for Anita's support. Anita had been her rock during the most difficult times of her life. She always knew what to say to lift Rubecca's spirits. Within 20 minutes, Anita arrived in her small blue car. She parked beside Rubecca and got out, rushing to her friend's side. Rubecca, look at you. You've been crying, Anita said, opening the passenger door and sitting beside her. What happened this time? It's Ken, Rubecca said, her voice cracking. He refuses to see another doctor with me. He shouted at me and said terrible things. Anita, I feel so alone. Anita shook her head, her eyes full of sympathy. That man is something else. After everything you've done for him, he has the audacity to treat you like this? It's not fair, Rubecca. It's not fair at all. I've tried, Anita. I've done everything to make this marriage work. I've endured insults from his family. I've gone to every hospital they suggested, but nothing ever changes. Anita placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Rubecca, listen to me. You are a strong woman. You've built a career for yourself and achieved so much. Don't let anyone, not even Ken or his family, make you feel like you're not enough. But Anita, how do I ignore the pain? How do I pretend everything is fine when I wake up to insults every day? You don't have to pretend, Anita said softly, but you do need to stand up for yourself. If Ken won't support you, then you have to focus on what's best for you. Maybe it's time to stop running after answers and start living for yourself. Rubecca stared at Anita, her words sinking in. Could she really take a step back from the endless cycle of tests and disappointments? Could she learn to focus on herself instead of constantly seeking approval from others? Anita, I don't know if I can do it, Rubecca whispered. You can, Anita said firmly, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way. Later that evening, Rubecca sat alone in her living room, her mind replaying Anita's words. She thought about the sacrifices she had made over the years, sacrifices that seemed to go unnoticed. Her phone buzzed again, and she sighed, expecting another unpleasant message from Vivian. But this time, it was a reminder of her appointment with the therapist she had booked weeks ago, but never attended. Rubecca stared at the message, hesitating. She had always pushed her own mental health aside, thinking it was unimportant compared to finding solutions to her infertility. But now she realized maybe it was time to focus on herself. Maybe it was time to heal her heart and mind before she could face the challenges ahead. Taking a deep breath, Rubecca replied to the message, I'll be there. As she set the phone down, she felt a small but significant shift within her. For the first time in a long while, she was choosing herself. Rubecca arrived at the therapist's office the next morning. It was a cozy space with soft lighting, calming paintings, and the faint scent of lavender in the air. She felt nervous but determined. If there was any hope of regaining control over her life, she needed to start here. Mrs. Rubecca Ken? A calm voice called out. She looked up to see a woman with warm eyes and a welcoming smile. Yes, that's me, Rubecca said, standing up. I'm Dr. Grace. Please come in. Rubecca followed her into the office, taking a seat on a plush armchair. She fidgeted with her fingers as Dr. Grace sat across from her, holding a notepad. This is a safe space, Rubecca, Dr. Grace said gently. You can tell me anything, and I'll do my best to help. Why don't we start with what brought you here today? Rubecca hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. I feel like my life is falling apart. My husband doesn't support me. My in-laws blame me for not having children, and I'm starting to doubt myself. I've done everything I can to fix the problem, but nothing works. I don't know what else to do. Dr. Grace nodded, her expression understanding. That sounds like a lot to carry, Rubecca. It's no wonder you feel overwhelmed. But tell me, why do you think having children has become such a central focus in your life? Rubecca blinked, caught off guard by the question. It's what everyone expects. In my culture, a woman's worth is tied to her ability to have children. If I can't give my husband a child, what am I even good for? Dr. Grace leaned forward slightly. And do you believe that's true? Do you believe your worth depends on having children? Rubecca opened her mouth to respond, but stopped. Did she truly believe that? She had never thought about it that way before. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. That's okay, Dr. Grace said. We'll explore that together. But for now, I want you to understand this. Your worth is not defined by anyone else's expectations. You are more than a wife, more than a daughter-in-law. You are a person with dreams, talents, and value. Rubecca felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had spent so many years trying to meet everyone else's expectations that she had forgotten who she was. Rubecca, Dr. Grace continued, I want you to try something. Every day, I want you to write down one thing about yourself that you're proud of. It could be something small, like finishing a task at work, or something big, like overcoming a difficult situation. Can you do that? Rubecca nodded. I'll try. When Rubecca got home that evening, she found Ken sitting in the living room, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up as she walked in. "Welcome," he muttered, his tone indifferent. Rubecca didn't respond. Instead, she went straight to the bedroom, her mind replaying Dr. Grace's words. After a quick shower, she sat at her desk with a notebook. She thought about her day and wrote, "I went to therapy today. It was hard, but I'm proud that I took the first step to take care of myself." As she closed the notebook, she felt a tiny spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, Rubecca committed to her therapy sessions. Slowly, she began to rediscover herself. She realized how much she had neglected her own happiness, how much she had sacrificed to please others. She started setting boundaries with her in-laws, refusing to answer their harsh messages. She focused on her work, taking pride in her accomplishments. And though her relationship with Ken remained strained, she began to understand that her happiness could not depend on him. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, Ken walked into the kitchen. "Rubecca," he said, his tone softer than usual. "Yes," she replied without looking up from the chopping board. "I've noticed you've been different lately. Happier, I think. What's changed?" Rubecca paused, then turned to face him. "I've stopped trying to be someone I'm not, Ken. I've stopped letting other people's opinions control my life." Ken frowned, as if struggling to process her words. "Does that mean you've stopped caring about us?" "No, Ken," she said firmly. "It means I've started caring about myself, and I think you should do the same." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For the first time, Ken seemed to really see her. Not as a wife, not as someone to blame, but as a woman who was fighting to reclaim her life. That night, as Rubecca lay in bed, she felt a strange sense of peace. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. She was her mother's daughter, strong, resilient, and ready to face whatever came next. Weeks passed, and Rubecca embraced her newfound strength. She had started enjoying her life again, focusing on her career and finding little moments of happiness. But even as she flourished, her marriage remained distant. Ken barely spoke to her, and his coldness lingered like a shadow in their home. One evening, Rubecca was at her office, finishing up some work when her phone buzzed. It was Anita. "Hey, Anita, what's up?" Rubecca asked, leaning back in her chair. "Rubecca, I'm not sure how to say this," Anita began, her voice hesitant. "What is it?" Rubecca asked, her heart skipping a beat. "I saw Ken today. He was with another woman." Rubecca froze. "What? Are you sure it was him?" "Yes," Anita said. "I saw them at the restaurant near my office. They were sitting close, laughing. It didn't look like a business meeting." The room started spinning around Rubecca. She gripped the edge of her desk, trying to steady herself. "Thank you for telling me, Anita," she said after a moment. Her voice was calm, but inside, a storm was brewing. "Are you okay?" Anita asked. "I will be," Rubecca said. "I'll talk to him tonight." That night, Rubecca waited for Ken to come home. When he finally walked through the door, she was sitting in the living room, her arms crossed. "Ken, we need to talk," she said firmly. Ken sighed, clearly irritated. "What is it now, Rubecca?" "I want to know where you were today," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "At work, of course," he replied casually, avoiding her gaze. "Don't lie to me, Ken. I know you were with another woman," she said, her voice trembling with both anger and hurt. Ken's face darkened. "Who told you that nonsense?" "It doesn't matter who told me." "Is it true?" Ken hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "So what if it is? Maybe I wouldn't need to spend time with other people if you weren't so obsessed with your so-called problems all the time." Rubecca stared at him in disbelief. "You're blaming me for your infidelity? Do you even hear yourself, Ken?" "I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying, you're not the woman I married anymore. You've changed," he said, his tone cold. "Yes, I've changed," Rubecca shouted. "I've stopped sacrificing myself for someone who doesn't even appreciate me. I've stopped letting your family treat me like trash while you stand by and do nothing." Ken's face twisted with anger. "If you're so unhappy, why don't you just leave?" Rubecca felt like the wind had been knocked out of her. She had always hoped that, deep down, Ken still cared. But now, she realized the truth. "Maybe I will," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the pain in her chest. The next morning, Rubecca packed a bag and left. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay in that house any longer. She checked into a small hotel and spent the day thinking about her next steps. That evening, her phone rang. It was Dr. Grace. "Rubecca, are you okay? You missed your session today," Dr. Grace said. "I left my husband," Rubecca said bluntly. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, Dr. Grace said, "That must have been a very difficult decision for you." "It was," Rubecca admitted, "but I couldn't stay in a place where I wasn't respected." "I'm proud of you, Rubecca," Dr. Grace said. "This is the beginning of a new chapter for you. It won't be easy, but I know you're strong enough to handle it." Rubecca felt a tear roll down her cheek. "Thank you, Dr. Grace. I needed to hear that." As the days turned into weeks, Rubecca started rebuilding her life. She rented a small apartment and focused on her career. For the first time in years, she felt free. One afternoon, while sorting through some old documents, she stumbled upon a letter addressed to her. It was from her late mother, written shortly before her death. With trembling hands, Rubecca opened the envelope and began to read. "My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you, but I want you to know how proud I am of you. Life will not always be kind, but you must never lose sight of your worth. Remember, you are your mother's daughter, strong, brave, and capable of overcoming anything. Don't let anyone dim your light. Always stand tall, my love." Rubecca clutched the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Her mother's words were exactly what she needed to hear. At that moment, she made a promise to herself. She would live a life that honored her mother's memory. She would be strong, brave, and unstoppable.